Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. You've done a lot of things and you've won a lot of awards for your work, and it's bloody marvelous. I'm basically I'm getting the overview. You're a leadership and human behavior expert. So
Mhm.
how do you Okay, there's a couple of things. First, I want to know how you got into it, but second, I want to ask you about the increase in behaviour that's going on at the moment, the shifts in behaviour. But let's go first. Why did you what got you into that?
I started, it kind of goes back a really long way. When I was going through school, I wanted to be a scientist of some sort. And I started a science degree at the university in Canberra when I was first out of school and had to support myself through uni. And it started to get a bit tough. So, end up in the public service. And I fell into what was back then called personnel, which was,
Yeah.
looking after people and sort of into, recruitment, learning development and so on. But as I continued with my career, I started to get really interested in just how people tick. And I think it reflects back on my wanting to do a science degree because I was
Yeah.
loved, human biology and brains and things like that.
Yeah.
And so um, I became I suppose, a bit of a nerd around it and started back in probably, it would have been very early 2000s, getting accredited in different psychometric tools so I could understand how to slice and dice people, so to
Yeah.
speak, in a nice way,
Yeah.
not in a sort of Hannibal Lecter way,
Yeah.
not having you for lunch. But yeah, so I got really interested in how humans tick, and then of course working in people and culture and organizational development as the field. As I moved through my career, it became really applicable because I was working with people and helping them to do things in business better. And of course, human behavior is such a large part of that. So
Yeah.
that's kind of where it started. It's always been an interest, which I've been lucky enough to turn into a career.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I do the same type of thing, and I can tell you that working for yourself is just when you say shifted into a career, for work
Mm.
for yourself, that's so much better. And I don't
Mm.
mean to be nasty about corporate stuff, but Jesus, it's like I don't want to work in that space. But have you noticed, like, so how long have you been doing this? So since not since 2003, did you?
No, so I started my business in 2012. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, I had cancer in 2010, and that made me really sort of think about life and what I wanted to do. So it was a natural progression to kind of get out and do my own thing. So I've been out for what's that, 12 years now, nearly 13
mm,
years. Mm.
yeah, yeah. Have you noticed what have you noticed the most about the way we're behaving as humans over the last 5 even years?
Look, it's been a really interesting shift, and a lot of it's to do with with social media in particular, the fact that
Mm,
information and disinformation is so readily available to people.
yeah.
And I really feel like we're losing our critical thinking ability. We're losing that
Mm,
ability to look at things and go, we're like, where's this information coming from? Who's got a vested interest in this?
mm,
Even research, it's like who paid for it, that
yeah.
kind of thing. So
Yeah.
I think we're moving into this very and look, we see it from a neuroscience perspective as well as people's ability to focus is diminishing a lot. We've gone,
Mm,
and I've noticed it myself. I've gone from being able to sit down with a good book and be completely absorbed in it for a couple of hours
mm,
to every 2 or 3 pages, I get distracted and my brain wanders off and I have to make an effort to bring it back. So we're getting much
mm,
more distractible. So, it's not I was going to say it's not necessarily a good or a bad thing. It depends on what you're doing
yeah.
and how you use it. But there's definitely been a shift in how humans are behaving. We seem to be with the online world. People are quite okay to say really vile things to a complete
Mm,
stranger that you'd never say to somebody face to face on the street. But they have.
mm,
It's almost like it brings out people's that sort of part of people that's hidden by social norms. Like
yeah.
it's not okay to
Yeah.
walk up to somebody and insult them in the street, but
Yeah.
we're quite okay doing it behind the keyboard because we've got that sort of sense of space that they can't do anything bad to me back.
Yeah.
So we're really seeing a shift in human behavior worldwide, and it concerns me.
It concerns me too. It's because it's becoming really disconnected. We're
Mm.
disconnecting from our compassion, yeah, like from our
Yeah.
own sense of compassion, our own sense of empathy, and
Mm.
we're just treating people. Like when I say we, just as a species, that
Mm.
we're treating people really awfully. I'm noticing an increase in a massive increase in incivility, in
Yes.
organisations. Are you seeing the same thing with that?
Yeah. And look, um, things like bullying in organisations has always been there, but and
Mm,
look, part of me is thinking, is it to do with people, are they bullying more, or is it just that people are less tolerant and it's being dealt with more effectively? But there's
mm,
certainly, we're getting big disconnects. And there's this sort of sense, like you said, that we've lost or losing our empathy. We're losing the sense of connection and engagement. And I think it's
mm,
because we are spending so much time in the online world and less time face to face that we're losing this, you're a human being just like me.
mm,
You become a face that I can shout at or insult or do whatever I like with, because it doesn't matter, because you're not a real person. And that's something that I think is a concern, particularly with the way that we work. And I mean, there's remote work and online work is open up doorways for people. It's enabled us to collaborate around the world. It's
mm.
given people the freedom to lose that 3-hour commute they used to have when they lived in
Yeah,
Sydney, driving into work and out again or catching the train. So it's
yeah.
created real opportunities for people, but we've got to be so careful we don't lose that human connection piece.
I agree, and it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? It's the same as
Mm,
social media. It's a double-edged sword. There's so
mm,
many amazing things about all of this. We can connect.
mm,
We can have work from home. We can just immediately contact somebody. We can like there's so many great things. But that 100% that bit about human connection. That
mm,
I remember when COVID hit. And I didn't want to do online stuff,
mm,
training and that. I was like, no, I want to do face to face. And people go, oh, just get over it. Like it's
mm,
that's the way we're going. And I think I was having a moments of grief.
mm,
Knowing that if if we abandon face to face, it not just for training, just face to face, we're going to be we're going to be in a hell of a state, because you would know, it's the intricacies of
mm.
people's bodies. When you're
Yep,
talking to them, the energy
yep,
you feel,
yep,
the sideways shift, like
yeah,
everything tells you so much about what's going on in that moment. And
yeah. And you lose
we
it.
you'll
And
do.
if
Yeah.
you're training on Zoom, for example, like I do training on Zoom, everyone's in a little matchbox sized square, so you can't
Yeah.
see the room. And
Yeah.
as soon as you put your slides up, you lose people, and you don't get, like, I have somebody else who, like a Zoom administrator, who sits online to watch people and will send me information like they're checking out, or they're getting very
Yeah.
excited about that, because I can't see them. And you
Yeah.
lose that connection in the room, because you lose that ability to sort of glance around and go, there's a person over there who's really struggling with the concepts. I'll just
Yep.
have a word during the break and see how they're traveling. Or I've got
Yep.
somebody over there who looks like something's really upset them. I better check in and see how that's going. Or this group of people are loving it. You get that, you lose that feedback.
You
And it
do.
makes it, you feel like you're just presenting into the void. So I found
Yeah.
that quite challenging too.
Yeah, although it has to happen, like
Oh, yeah.
it's either
Mm,
we do that, or we're not going to get to some people. But I totally agree with you, and particularly that if you're in a room and that's somebody in the corner, you've got so much more capacity to
mm,
say, so let's get this activity underway, and then you can just wander over
yep,
there quietly and say, "You okay?"
exactly.
And you just can't do that on Zoom because everyone's like, "Who's okay?
Yeah.
What's happening
What's going
there?"
on? And like I said, they're in matchbox sized squares. You can't
I
tell.
know.
And look, it's
Yeah.
opened up doors, because I mean, I've done work in India and in, the US,
Yeah.
UK, and so on over Zoom. And look, I've done big things in India with like 80 people on Zoom.
Yeah.
And, you literally can't see them. But so it's opened up doors, but it's also, again, you miss that. You miss that sort of connection, that ability to kind of
Yeah.
just, and somebody can ask you a question. You can just sort of squat down next to where they're sitting and have a little bit of a chat to them, which you can't do,
Yeah. Yeah.
on Zoom. Mm,
I think both are great, and I think I'm definitely a proponent of face to face, but the online stuff is, as you say, we can connect with anyone anywhere, and it's really
mm,
fantastic. I think it's and this is my opinion. This no one else has to adhere to this, but I think we have a responsibility,
mm.
to get a good balance,
Yes.
and to make sure that we're role modeling a good balance,
Mm.
and that people understand that this is good, but so is this, and let's make sure that we're measuring
Let's
it,
do it.
if that makes
Exactly.
sense. Yeah.
And like, with people who work in, hybrid environments, as a lot of organizations do, there's definitely a place to bring your team together face to face.
Mm,
Uh, you know, look, I'm working with leaders who are struggling because they've got everyone's part-time or everyone's working
Yeah.
from home part-time and there's no one day when everyone's together.
Yeah.
And I've said to them, look, it's actually really important that you make the effort to bring the team together.
Yeah.
Maybe you make it, like you have a team meeting on a Monday morning and that is mandatory for people to come in for because they need to
Mm.
spend time together. You need to connect,
Yeah.
to brainstorm, to do that. And then they can work at home for the rest of the time. But you've got to create that connection. Or
Yeah.
maybe if you can't get them together for a meeting, maybe it's something where you have to do like a lunch once a month
Yeah.
that, again, people need to attend because
Yeah.
otherwise you lose that connection.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's critical, and it doesn't have to be every day, but it
No.
just has to be those
Yeah.
touch points that are
Yeah.
regular. Yeah, I agree.
Once a week, once a fortnight, but get
Yeah,
people together. And the more infrequent it is, the longer the time is you need to spend together. So if
yeah,
you only get together once a quarter, it should be for a full day.
yeah, yeah.
Because we and look, you can get really good at creating connection over Teams or Zoom, but you need to work at it. And it's often seen as like the meetings there, we have the meeting, we talk about work. And because we're on Zoom or Teams, nobody does the chit chat. Nobody kind of goes, how was your
Yeah,
weekend?
yeah,
I saw your football team went well, or, how are the kids,
mm,
because we get straight into the work.
yeah,
Whereas when we're face to face, we do, if someone's a bit late for the meeting, everyone does that little chit chat thing and we miss
yeah,
that. So you've
yeah,
got to create those human moments over
yeah,
your Zoom or your Teams platform somehow.
yeah. It's a lot of actually cognitive strain running
Mm.
Zoom meetings.
Oh, yeah.
It's actually way harder than
Yes.
to be standing upright in a room.
It's exhausting, isn't it? You
Yeah,
kind of And look, it's exhausting. And the reason people get that Zoom fatigue is because our brain's working so hard because we're missing the whole
yeah,
person. We can't look at
yeah,
body language. So all we've got is that little square with your face in
yeah,
it. And our brain has to work so hard to interpret the data from that because we're a
yeah,
sense making species and our
yeah,
brain is just trying to make sense of everything. So it's looking
yeah,
at you in your little square and go, how are you going?
yeah,
And all I can see is this tiny little bit of you. I can't see the whole person. So we're
yeah.
working really hard and it exhausts our brain.
Yeah. It is exhausting. Um,
Mm.
you you in 2018, I'm really curious about this. You released the Women's Leader Archetypes, a model and assessment. Tell us about that. I'm so curious about that.
That's been a journey and it's been so much fun. It goes back to 2016
Oh,
when the 18
oh,
was when I
that's right.
released
Two
it.
years of
2000
making it.
2 years of
Yeah.
research. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it kind of came out of accumulation of things. So my daughter started work. She's in her 30s now, but she started work and she was in a very male dominated environment and still is, but she was talking to me about the kinds of things, the issues that I had when I started work a generation previously. And I kind of realized that things really hadn't changed for women in that time.
Mm,
I mean, I knew that, but it was it's always more personal when it's
yeah.
somebody in your family. And I was working with women leaders who were saying to me they were, and I still do, that look at the glass ceiling and they look beyond that and go, I'm not sure I want that world. I
Mm,
don't want the pressure, the responsibility, the long hours, the intense focus that you have to be in that really senior position. So I'm not sure I actually want that. And it got me sort of reflecting on, is there a way to do this differently? Like, why is it not working for women? And is there something else we can do? And so I put a shout out on to people that I knew through LinkedIn and Facebook and emails and things and said, look, I'm thinking about women in leadership. I'd like to have a chat to people, anyone who wants to talk to me really about their experience as a woman in the workplace, in your own business, whatever you're doing in the leadership community, whatever. I'd like to hear from you. And I ended up with 538 women from around the world, which was
wow.
fabulous.
Yeah.
And they were an amazing focus group for me because I ran surveys, I did interviews on Zoom, they sent me emails, they sent me letters, the whole kit and caboodle, talking about what it was like to be a woman at work. And what came out of that was really this concept that women and men actually lead differently. And it's not that one's better than the other, it's complementary. It's just we need both, not one or the
Mm,
other. And women were talking about, when I left corporate and started my own business, and this is what it's like for me now, and the contrast with this being able to lead naturally how it works for me rather than feeling like I need to be, like the male CEO in order to be
mm,
successful. And so the model, it was almost like a crowdsourcing type of activity. Like it was, I could send an email out to the group and say, finish this sentence, a sovereign woman is, and they'd send me back these
mm,
amazing thoughts and ideas. So it was almost like I kind of feel like I just put a framework around it and
mm.
created something that, was really quite crowdsourced. And then released it in 2018. And then since then, we've had over 10,000 women take the assessment.
Mm,
And last year, I launched an accreditation program for women coaches who want to get accredited to use it with their clients. And just last week, actually, we released the multi-rater feedback version of it, which is really exciting because now women can get feedback from people around them on what they see. So here's what I'm
mm,
intending, and then this is what people experience of me. So
mm,
it's been really exciting, and it's been a great journey, and I've loved it. But I just loved the people that I talked to and the stories that I got, good, bad, and ugly. There were
mm,
some women with amazing stories, and there were other women who were like, "I'm just struggling. I can't deal with this."
mm.
So there was quite like I said, a really big a difference in how men and women lead. And then I sort of went, well, why is this?
Yeah.
I got really curious about like, why is this? What is it? Why have we created this thing that doesn't really work for women?
Mm,
And I went back to pre-industrial revolution and back to the old days, I suppose you could say, but also looking at um, First Nations people around the world and tribal structures and how we do it. If you leave people alone, how do we tend to organize ourselves?
mm,
And found a world where um, again, men and women had very different roles and they're very complementary roles. And women led in their own way, in their own authentic way, and men did what they needed to do. And then the Industrial Revolution happened and men went to work and women weren't there. So work as it was designed by men without women because we just weren't represented. And
mm,
so we've now got this structure and this hierarchy and this idea of what leadership looks like, which is not working necessarily for women. Because when
mm.
women and look, it happened to me. I mean, I started. I think about my working life, and I had a lot of male managers, and I looked at them and went, "That's what I need to do to be successful. If I want to
Yeah.
be a leader, I need to behave like that."
Yeah.
And then you do, and as a woman, you then end up being told you're too opinionated, you're too loud, you're too bitchy, you're too bossy, you're
Mm,
too everything. Tone
mm,
it down, tone it down, and then you tone it down, and then you get being told you're not speaking up enough. You need to be
mm.
assertive. You need to
Yeah.
speak out more. And so you sort of end up in this no-win situation where no
Yeah.
matter what you do, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And I talk to so many people who say
Yeah,
exactly that same thing. And it's exhausting,
it
utterly
is.
exhausting that you're not even getting your work done. I mean, you are
Mm,
getting work done, but there's so much energy that could be going into your work
mm,
and not going into all this, pendulum swinging,
mm,
trying to keep yourself upright. So, well,
mm.
how many archetypes are there in
So
the
there's
model?
there's eight. So the model is split into empowered archetypes and shadow archetypes. So the
Yeah,
empowered archetypes are women at our best, and the
yeah,
shadow archetypes are what happens when things aren't going well for us. So
yeah,
it could be big things in life, or it could be small things. It's even that sort of, too much work on, feeling too much pressure, not getting enough sleep,
yeah,
had a
yeah,
bad day, kids were ratty this morning, that kind of thing. But
yeah,
if we start with the empowered archetypes, we've got the sovereign archetype at the very top, and it's all about self-esteem and self-worth and being our best selves, living our best lives.
yeah.
So when you meet a sovereign woman, they're usually very interesting people because they're doing their own thing,
Mm,
whatever that looks like. And it
yeah,
could be heading up an organization, or it could be running their own business, or it could be, whatever they want to do, being a yoga instructor. But they're
yeah,
living their best life on their own terms. They've
yeah,
gone, I've decided I want the best for me, and this is what it looks like. And off they
yeah,
go and do it.
yeah.
And then we've got the next tier, which is situational archetypes, which is the idea of the right style with the right people for the right reasons at the right time. And they're split up by human motivation. So we've got the warrior who's motivated by achievement, and
Yeah,
that's the get it done.
yeah,
Big vision, big goals, big strategy, breaking it down into doable chunks and delivering.
yeah,
So a warrior is very focused on delivering. But the key thing here is that it's not doing it to prove anything.
mm,
So it's not doing it because I feel like I need to compete with the men, or I feel like I need to prove myself by being more competent or doing more than anyone else. It's just, I do it because I love it. Getting stuff
yeah,
done is amazing. Why would you not want to do that?
yeah, yeah,
And then we've got our wise woman archetype, which is motivated by influence. And one of the interesting things that I found in exploring this male versus female thing is that when women have power, they very often use it, it's socialized power. We use it for the good of the collective.
yeah,
I use my power wisely for the good of the organization, for the community, for the team, for the planet,
yeah,
whatever it is I'm doing. It's that socialized power.
yeah,
And in a lot of times, it's about knowledge, which is hence the wise woman. So you find
yeah,
women sharing knowledge freely. They share their power, they share their knowledge, they coach, they mentor, they learn, they have a growth mindset, they help other people grow and develop. And they're often advisors, they're sought after for wisdom and knowledge, but it really is
yeah,
this sense that I share it freely because it's great. Why wouldn't
yeah,
everyone want to have it?
yeah,
And then we've got our tribe builder, which is the one focused on people. And over here, it's about, that beautiful sense of people are great. I love them. I surround myself with people. Tribe builders they've always got people around them. They just love
Yep.
people.
Yep.
And they bring people together. They create, community. They create this idea of collective vision. They work together. So that really is the team building side of
Yep.
things.
Yep.
And so we've got these four, and when women operate really effectively, that's what we see. We see they bring their sovereign into it, which is me being my best self.
Mm.
How do I deliver the work that I need to do? How do I create influence, and how do I support and grow other people? And then how do I build my community to get it done?
Yep.
And
Yep.
so you get this beautiful sort of flow. And then we have the shadow archetypes, which happen when things aren't going well. And look, everybody does this. It's like a threat response. So
Yep.
if you know the threat responses of fight, flight, freeze, and
Yep.
fawn, that's our four archetypes.
Yep. Yep.
So the shadow of the warrior, the tyrant, is about when I slip into needing to prove myself. So I'm still doing things. It's still very focused on achieving things, but I need to prove myself. I feel insecure if I'm not achieving.
Yep.
So my sense of worth is attached to, am I delivering or not? So you get perfectionism, you get imposter syndrome, you get that, that drive, that hustle, that sense of, and that's often that masculine tone that creeps into women when they get those, they become really senior, is that sort of sense. I've got to drive really hard. And they burn themselves out and they burn out their teams because of this relentless drive for success.
Yeah.
And then your lone wolf, which is the shadow of a wise woman, and that's about, that lovely flow of power and knowledge and influence is shared, becomes, I've got to have it all for myself. You can't have any, so I need to control it. So I'm not going to share. I'm not going to delegate. I'm not going to teach you what I know, because if I'm the only person who knows that, I'm irreplaceable.
Yep.
So this sense of, influence and control is very much part of, you often see status symbols there as well. I've got to buy designer handbags to show you how successful I've been.
Yep.
And then you've got the martyr, which is the shadow of the tribe builder. And that's about people pleasing. So I've slipped from people are lovely into, how do I make sure you like me? I need to make sure that you like me, because otherwise I don't feel worthy.
Yeah.
And if there's anyone who doesn't like me or disapproves of me, I feel terrible about myself. So there's a lot of energy goes into making people like them. So it's a very it's a challenging place to be, because they literally martyr themselves. It's this sort of sense that they'll set themselves on fire to keep everybody else warm, and they don't look after themselves. They come last. They're always doing things for other people. They're always helping, doing whatever, and they leave nothing for themselves. They burn themselves out by emptying the tank completely. And then we've got our hermit, who's the bottom of the archetype diamond, and that's really this place where we're not going well and we withdraw completely. So into our hermit cave. Yeah. So the idea that we procrastinate, we don't deal with issues, we're not talking to people we need to talk to, we're not dealing with perceived conflict, we just, completely withdraw from things. Yeah. So that's the model. And I call them archetypes because archetypes are a behavioural pattern that people know. So you say to somebody, oh, that person's a complete drama queen, and everyone knows what that means. Yeah. Or, oh, he always plays the hero. Everyone knows what that means. So archetypes are just a pattern of behaviour, essentially.
Yeah. I love it.
Thank you.
Absolutely love it. Yeah, I love it. And I can see that in so many people. As you were saying it, I'm like, that's that one and that one and that one. Yep. And then the shadow, I think that's really important to acknowledge the shadow, and often we don't. Often we try to, in particular in leadership roles, try to always show up as the whatever you would call the positive side of it, the
empowered,
the empowered side of it, and but that's not really what's happening. That's the facade, the mask that people put on. And I think that if we understand our shadow side and we accept it and we, I suppose, commit to learn more about it, and commit to understand this is a perfectly natural thing.
It is. It's normal.
Yeah. What's making it? What's accentuating it? When is it at its best? When is it quiet? When does it come? Understanding the situations that bring the worst out in us. When I say the worst, I think we've been sort of brainwashed for a long time that it's bad to be upset. It's bad to be angry. It's bad to have a shadow side. But that's just it's who we are as humans.
It's human. Yeah, it's human to do that. And these, like I said, they're threat responses. And in it, our brain doesn't, our brain in a lot of ways is quite primitive when it comes to threat. It doesn't know the
Yeah.
difference between my boss is shouting at me and I'm being attacked by a bear, and it has
Yeah.
the same response, which is,
Yeah.
my life is at threat here, so I have to
Yeah.
respond using these threat responses.
Yeah.
And it's completely normal and completely human. But what you've touched on is exactly that. It's like knowing you're there and going,
Mm.
wow, I've just found myself in the tyrant. What's going on for me today? Like, why am I feeling the need to prove myself? Why am I pushing so hard?
Mm. Yeah.
What's going on? I mean, sometimes it can be about, I'm feeling really overwhelmed, and my response to overwhelm is to work harder. As if by
Yeah.
taking on more and working harder is going to get me out of overwhelm.
Yeah.
We know that's not going to happen, but it's just
Yeah.
that response. And being
Mm.
able to look at it and go, um, like you said, what's going on for me today? Why am I feeling like this? Let's just
Mm.
take pause and figure this out,
Yeah.
and then make some choices about what I'm going to do.
Yeah. And I
So I can
actually
keep
think,
pushing and feel worse, or I can just go, I've got to let it go and do something more
yeah,
constructive. Mm.
I agree. And I think that's better leadership. It's better leadership to actually say, today I'm in a shitty place. And why? And it's like the above the line, below the line model,
Yeah.
and I always
Yes,
teach,
absolutely.
who cares? Like we're all gonna, it's a nicer place above the line, and it's where we
Mm.
want to be. But as a human being, if you're bullshitting and saying that you never go below the line, that's a big
Mm.
load of shit, because every single human being goes
Mm.
below the line, and multiple times a day. And
Yes.
the trick isn't to go, oh, I'm a terrible person, I'm self-punishing, I've gone below the line. The trick is just to go, oh shit, I'm there again. What
Yep.
caused it? Oh well, I'll stay here as little time as possible and let me get back up. And that is mastering
Mm.
yourself, like
Yeah. And
we are.
it's being comfortable with being uncomfortable too,
Yeah.
which is, like it's just, if we use the martyr as an example, the martyr is sacrificing everything. Like, she's taking on a lot of work because she doesn't want to
Yeah.
give it to other people, because she feels like they'll hate her if she does.
Yeah.
Everyone's got a lot on, so I need to take it all on. She's working crazy hours. She's not looking after herself. And she has to start saying no. And that can be
Mm.
really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But you've got to be comfortable with the idea that it's going to be uncomfortable to work with, which is,
Yeah.
even though it makes me feel like this person's going to hate me, I'm going to need to say no. And
Yeah.
it's an experiment. You say no, and the person goes, cool. And they go and do
I
something
know.
else. And you're like, oh my God, I thought they were going to hate me because I said no,
I
and they
know.
didn't.
It doesn't happen 99% of the time. All this shit that we've got in our heads, this
Yeah.
narrative we've told ourselves is, the
Yeah.
drama that's going to
Yeah.
unfold. It never does. I mean, well, sometimes, but
It usually
rarely.
doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah,
And you kind of
rarely.
go, and I get clients who do that, like, setting boundaries. I'll give them scripts to use so they can say no and not feel horrible about it. But they're
Yeah.
like, I tried out one of the scripts and I felt so bad. And the person just went, oh, okay, I'll go find someone else then.
Yeah.
And they're like,
Yeah.
I couldn't believe that. I thought they're going to be really upset with me, but they just went, fine, I'll find somebody else. And there was no consequence and everything worked out.
Yeah.
Because you're right, we tell ourselves a story, and that's what's
Yeah.
going on. Is the martyr's story is, if I don't do everything for everybody and please everybody and make everyone happy, they're going to hate me.
Yeah. Which is just a bloody story.
Yeah.
And it brings me back to that
Mm,
statement, those who mind don't matter and those who matter don't mind.
exactly.
If those who don't matter hate you, well, so be it. Fuck off. Let's go on.
Yeah.
Bye. It
Yeah,
doesn't really
exactly.
matter.
And that's the
Um,
thing, is that, you get people who gets, because people think about us a lot less than we think they do. We like to
that's
think that
right.
it's all about us, that everybody's thinking about us all the
Yeah.
time, and they're not. They just don't care.
No, that's exactly right. And we're just building and building that story up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now you
And
also,
yeah,
oh no, go
I
finish
was just
them.
going to say, and that's really the thing about it, is that if we stop being concerned with what people think, it's not about we don't care, but we stop being
Yeah.
concerned about it. We
Yeah.
go, like the sovereign, being her best self is like, there are going to be some people who don't approve of my best self. There are going to be some people who are like, why did you chuck your high paying job and start,
Yeah.
teaching yoga in Bali?
Yeah.
But I don't care what they think. It doesn't bother me because I'm living my best life.
Yeah. And I agree with that completely. There's that one, and I say I want people to like me, but I don't need people to
No,
like me. And that
exactly.
is a really freeing situation to be in. But the other thing that you said about that is and I talk about this a lot, is that there's a difference between being arrogant, and that is,
Mm.
I don't give a shit whether you like me or not. Too
Yep.
bad. That's a real arrogant stance, but it's whether
Yep.
but the more confident stance, or the more, comfortable with yourself stance, values-based stance, is
Mm.
that I'd like you to like me.
Yeah.
If you don't, well, too bad, but
Sometimes it happens. People don't get on,
yep,
personality clashes, values, and so on. It'd be
yep,
nice if you like me, but at the end of the day, I can't make you like me. And if you don't like me, then no judgment. Not going to
yep.
judge you, not going to judge me. We're just both going to move on happily with our lives.
Oh, and how nice
Mm.
would it be if the world just operated like that? Because we
Yeah.
we we're so cranky about people not liking us and people
Mm.
not, living up to our expectations or our values, and it's just
Mm.
like we waste so much. I
Yeah.
just
And
think we
it's
waste so much
really
time.
exacerbated by social media
Yeah,
because
it
of this
is. Yeah,
thing of people will be like, I posted and nobody liked my post,
yeah,
therefore I'm a complete failure. And it's not. It's just like, you put a thought out there, maybe the
yeah,
people that would normally have commented didn't see it.
yeah.
It's not
Who?
the end of the world.
No, and I think metrics has really. I think metrics has been one of the worst things for us as humans. It's
Yeah.
measuring by people that you don't even know.
Yeah.
Like you
Measuring
might
our
think,
likability.
yeah, it's like half the people on Facebook we don't even bloody know. I mean, that doesn't mean we don't like them, or that doesn't mean
Yeah.
we don't care about them. Like everyone I've got on Facebook, I don't even know half of them, but I still wish their well-being well. I wish
Yes.
them to be happy and well and safe. And it's nice
Mm.
when they make a comment. You think, oh, that's a lovely thing to say about someone. Do
Yeah.
but to need someone to like your no, no.
No.
But anyway, now you've also written a book, The Resilient Employee, The Essential Guide to Coping with Change and Thriving in Today's Workplace. Is that, tell us about that. I was going to ask this question. Is that just for female leaders? But I'm assuming
No.
no.
No,
Yeah,
it's
no.
everybody.
Yeah.
And look, I can't remember when that was published. It might have been 2016. Before the
2016.
yeah, before
Yeah.
the archetypes.
Yeah.
So that was about I developed a training program. This is going back before I actually left my corporate role. It was kind of in the train then, and I fleshed it out once I left. And it's about resilience in change. And so this idea of it's three. There's three programs. There's one for people experiencing change. There's one for people leading change, and there's one for
Yeah.
very senior leaders about how to be authentic during change. And when I started running these programs, I started getting really amazing feedback. People were sort of saying this was incredible. Like, it's been so helpful to me. I was having people who were, you know, almost bursting into tears and saying, I thought I was the only person who was this upset about what's
Yeah.
happening in our business. And now I realize everyone feels the same way. And it's such a
Mm.
relief to me to feel like I'm not alone.
Yeah.
And so the book idea was lots of people sort of started saying, are you writing about this? And I'm like, yeah, I'm blogging a bit and things. And they said, well, it'd be great if you wrote something. And I thought it was really the idea was to get the concepts out there to more people because it really is, it was helping people, still is helping people so much. It was how do I get it out? So I started writing and I had an amazing VA at the time who basically said to me, so I've written a book before, I don't know what I'm doing. And she said, look, give me everything you've got, all your slides, all your facilitator notes, all your things you've written, all your blogs, all your brain farts, and give it all to me and I'll sort it in some sort of order. And then she came back with this document that had things in it and there was big gaps that said, you need to write something for here, or this hasn't been explained, or I think a story would be good over here. And so I filled in all the blanks. It was like putting a jigsaw together. I had this box full of jigsaw pieces and she built the jigsaw and then went, here's all the bits that are missing. So she was really instrumental in getting it to happen. And then
Mm.
when I launched it, it was uh, quite phenomenal. Like it went to number one in Australia and New Zealand. It was top 10 in the UK and it was top
Wow.
25 in the US in the whole of business category. It wasn't, because some
Wow.
people cheat the system and they release it into a really obscure category where there's like one
Yeah.
book. And so
Yeah. Yeah.
somebody buys one copy and it's like bestseller.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, and look, it was released right when Brexit was announced, coincidentally, and it got really good sales in the UK because of that. Because I think people were
Mm.
googling, what happens if I lose my job,
Yeah.
and it's continued to sell really well. And it's been like I remember somebody stopped me in the supermarket and said, "You wrote that book, didn't you?" And I kind
Wow.
of like, yeah, I guess. And she just stood there in the supermarket and told me this amazing story of how much it had helped her when she was going through a big redundancy. She got made redundant. She said how much it helped her. So that was
Wow.
the driver behind the book, was to get it out and help as many people as possible.
Mm. Isn't it? You know what? It's funny. I was just talking to somebody before who said, I started something because there was nothing out there, and I've
Mm,
heard that, You didn't say it exactly like that, but I've heard that said so many times. I wrote a book because I couldn't find the one I wanted to read.
Mm,
I started the podcast because I didn't have the community that I was looking for. And well, one, you're lucky you had that VA because
mm,
God, do I wish I had someone like
yeah.
that at times, I can tell you. But isn't it the things that really do go to bestsellers and the things that really have an impact is that thing that everyone's looking for, but
Mm,
it's not there. Do you
mm,
know? And then suddenly it is there, and it's
mm,
and listening to you talking, you had the three programs and you had all these blogs and you had all this information and that. I actually think that we don't realize how much knowledge we have.
mm,
I think that we just go many people, like not
mm,
just in this field, but just many people go about their business, and they can tell you anything about a particular topic or you know what I
mm,
mean. They've got a big bucket of information.
mm.
And when you say to people, you should write a book, it's kind of like, well, what what would I say?
Yeah.
I
Where
don't,
to
I don't have
start?
any, I don't have any information to say on that.
Mm,
But you've been talking about it for 10 years. Oh yeah,
mm,
but that doesn't make me an
yeah.
expert.
And
It's
like when I gave it all over to Lily, and she said, "Look, just give it to me, and I'll sort through it," because she's a she writes young adult fiction,
oh
and so
wow.
she knows how to structure a book. And she said,
Yeah.
"Look, let me have a look at it all." And when I gave it all to her, I thought, "There's going to be nothing really in this.
Yeah.
It might be a pamphlet
Yeah.
if I'm lucky." And then she came back and she's like, "So I've sorted it all into chapter headings, and I've put into sort of like an order that makes sense. What do you think? And here's all the gaps that I see." And it was mostly there.
Wow.
It took me
Yeah.
another, I mean, obviously there's a lot of, it's got to be edited, it's got to be rewritten a number of times. There's a lot that goes into it. I'm not going to kind of pretend it was really
Mm.
super easy to do, but
Mm.
I was surprised by how much I already had.
Yeah. 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 And writing a book is achievable for anybody. Like it is
Mm,
achievable, but you hit the nail on the head. It is not easy.
mm,
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. Now, you've got you say one of the topics that you talk about, 5 keys to smashing the glass ceiling.
mm-hmm.
Share those keys with us because that glass ceiling blocks so many people.
It does.
Oh
It
my God.
does. And
Yes.
look, there's quite a bit to it, but essentially it's the first thing is really about our own sense of confidence and our own sense of self-belief, because women get in their own way a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And we know this from research that there's lots of things about how a woman will only apply for a job if she feels like 110%
Yeah.
qualified, whereas a man will
Yeah.
chuck his hat in the ring. He goes, 8 selection criteria, I got 3,
Yeah.
chucks his hat in the ring. So
Yeah.
we hold ourselves back a lot. There's that sense of we need to, Sheryl Sandberg said, lean in more.
Yeah.
There's a lot to unpack in all of that, but it really is this sense of our, confidence and self-belief.
Yeah.
There's this idea that holds women back, that they need to join the boys club to be successful, that
Mm.
they need to have had some kind of, male mentor who'll support them and give them opportunity. And that absolutely does work, but we don't need it necessarily.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, the and look, the system needs to change. That's one of the key things that I'm really working on at the moment. My next kind of big thing is how do we get the system to change, because it really is stacked against women to a large degree.
Yeah.
You do get, and look, I'm working with a client at the moment who has men at the very senior level, and they've got a lot of women at the next level down who are looking at it, and like I might have said earlier, they're looking at it and going, I actually don't want that world.
Yeah.
I've got kids, I've got a family, I want to be home at 5 o'clock to be able to feed the
Yeah.
kids. I want to drop them off to school in the morning. I don't want to have to start work at 6 o'clock in the morning and finish at 9 o'clock at night. It's not okay
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
Um, so the things that really women need to work on is this sense of being able to articulate their own value,
Mm.
which is I can clearly understand my own value, the value that I bring to the organisation or to my profession. I can articulate that to other people. I've
Mm.
got that real sense of clarity about what I bring to the table and
Yeah.
being confident about that sense of value. There's visibility, which is how do we increase women's visibility inside organisations, because a lot of opportunities are given to the people that are the most visible, not necessarily the
Mm.
person
Yeah.
who's best for the job. You
Yeah.
may have noticed that.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
The loudest person gets the gong every time. So how do we increase visibility?
Yeah.
And that's about, like, for example, there's a client I was working with who, in her industry, was able to be because of the job that she had. She was almost like a spokesperson for the industry, but she hadn't really done anything with that role. So we had to start to write op-eds for the local paper and start to do radio interviews and increase the visibility. And then she started getting government come to her and going, we're putting together a task force to look at this thing. Would you like to be part of the task force?
Wow.
So it went from
Great.
really quickly her being completely unknown to suddenly being the face of her industry in a pretty short time.
Yeah.
And then there's this, creating strategic connections and networking, because women are really good at making connections, but often we're not particularly strategic about it.
Yeah.
It'll be, I make connections because I like you and you're a nice person, or we've got something in common. We develop a friendship.
Yeah.
Whereas strategically, it's about looking at who do I need in my network? How do I actually connect with those people? If my organisation is the kind of organisation where you really can't get a senior role unless you've got some sort of male sponsor, how do I find myself a sponsor? How do I connect with people in my industry that maybe outside of my workplace that might mentor me? How do I, develop those strategic relationships that will help me advance my career?
Yeah.
So that's kind of it. It's, it's one of those simple but not easy things. There's certainly a structure to it, this idea that we need to get out of our own way, articulate our own value, become more visible, become more strategic, and apply for something when you don't think you've got it all.
Yeah.
Richard Branson started an airline with no experience because he got stranded on holiday because the flight got cancelled.
Yeah.
He wandered around the airport till he found a private plane and said, how much to charter your plane? Went back to all the people who were, what are we going to do now? And said, guys, I've chartered a private plane. It's going to cost you $1,000 each. Who's in?
Yeah.
And he started an airline.
I know. I love that story.
I know. Didn't know anything about airlines,
No. But no, and I love that. I love that kind of thing. So, you mentioned in there about imposter syndrome, right? Now, a lot of people talk about imposter syndrome, and I know several men, but I could right now who say I don't have imposter syndrome. I'm great.
Yeah.
But a lot of women actually, when I talk about it, a lot of women say, "What's that?" And they genuinely mean, "What's that?" As in, I've never heard those words. But when you explain it, they're like, "Oh my God, that's me. I've got that all the time." Do you know? Why do you reckon women have a greater sense of imposter syndrome than men?
Look, imposter syndrome is partly nature and partly nurture. So what we find with the roots of imposter syndrome is it's often women who set themselves really high expectations, and they've often been in their childhood quite talented or gifted at something. And so, look, I'll use my daughter as an example. I hope she won't mind if she's listening. I'm really sorry. She'll be like, Mum. But when she went through school, she was a really smart kid. She was like top of the class. She did university level maths when she was in like grade 11 and things like that. And then she became an engineer. And I remember her saying when she started uni, she went, it's really weird. I've gone from being like really, really smart to being just kind of average because she was suddenly in a pool of people who were all very gifted and very talented and predominantly male. There was only, I think, 2 or 3 women in the year she went through. And so you've got that sense of everything come fairly easily to you. And all of a sudden it stops being easy. And then you get this sense that maybe I'm not smart at all. Maybe I've just been pretending all this time. Maybe I just got lucky. That's something women will say, I just got lucky. I was in the right place at the right time, or nobody else applied for the job, or, I probably wouldn't have been considered except that man left. So we tend to sort of look at it, women who have imposter syndrome tend to look at their success as something that's just happened by luck, by chance. But it does come from that root of usually having been a very, an intelligent or gifted child in some way, and then suddenly it stopped being easy. And then they look at it and go, everything that I've had in my childhood's been a complete fraud because clearly I wasn't that smart all along. And so that's the kind of experience. And then you've got this, other life experiences too, this sort of idea that, failing becomes a really big deal for people. It's this idea that, I'm either exceeding or I'm failing. And that gets built up by parental influences. So if you've got a family who value schoolwork and they're like, unless you're getting an A, you're nothing. Like, why didn't you get an A for that? Why did you only get a B plus?
Yeah.
And then the child believes that their only value is in outperforming everything else. And when they can't outperform, they failed. And that's where imposter syndrome comes from, is this sort of idea of partly nature, partly nurture.
Yeah, interesting. When you were saying about that, being incredibly talented, and then like going to
Mm.
university, you didn't know, and then
Mm.
suddenly I'm not the smartest. And that's what's sitting in my head is the Dunning Kruger
Yeah,
that's it's it, the Dunning Kruger curve, and it's kind of
yeah,
like the people who are self aware and the people who are emotionally intelligent are now going, wait a minute,
mm.
there's a lot more to learn. But the ones that are not, the arrogant ones that I was talking about before, they're already up here going, no, I'm confident. I'm better.
Yeah,
Their confidence is what far outweighing their
yeah.
competence.
The
And
university's
yeah,
wrong, you know.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I came across
That's right.
somebody once who had been trying to go back to uni as a mature age student. And look, in all fairness to everybody, she didn't strike me as being overly bright, but she said to me that she'd failed the university entrance exam 4 or 5 times. She's like, well, clearly the university's got it wrong. If somebody who's as talented as me can't pass their test is wrong.
Oh dear.
And you
Yeah.
do get that. So yeah, so imposter syndrome is I remember I went to a conference way back in probably the 90s when it was first being talked about, and a psychologist came and explained it. And then she asked for a show of hands in the room as to who'd ever experienced it. And I looked around the room, and 3/4 of the room had their hands up, but majority of them were women.
Yeah.
The ones with
Yeah.
their hands down were the men in the room. But
Yeah.
it comes from this deep seated fear of failing, and I
Mm.
can't then um, the smallest thing that feels like a failure then turns into I'm going to be exposed for being a fraud because I'm
Yeah.
clearly rubbish at everything.
Yeah.
And I've just been
Yeah.
pretending to be good, and everyone's going to discover that, and I'm going to be discredited.
Yeah.
And it's a very real fear.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a very real fear, but it's usually a very wrong narrative. Like it's
Yes.
very usually not
Mm.
correct at all.
Yeah. And look, my daughter recovered well. I mean, she kind of went, we had a chat about when you go to university, you're being surrounded by the brightest of the brightest.
Mm.
So in school, it's easy to be the brightest person in the class. But when you go to
Mm.
university, you're surrounded by everybody else who is also the brightest in their class
And passionate about that
and
topic,
passionate about it. Yeah. I mean, she
which
did engineering and science. So,
yeah,
surrounded by a lot of really smart people. So it's
yeah.
something that you need to expect. But there will be lots of people who get thrown into that and have that reality check of, I thought I was smart, now I'm not. And then
Mm.
they question everything. It's like, maybe I've never been smart all along. Maybe I've just been pretending.
Mm. That's sad, isn't it? Actually,
Mm,
that is
mm.
sad. You talk about values-based leadership, and you know, uh, tell us what you mean by that. Like, I've already got my own assumptions about what you
Mm.
mean by that, but what, in your mind, from where you're coming from, what does that mean, and why is it important?
So values based leadership is leading from a space where you're really clear about your values and you live them.
Yep,
And you see it not happening sometimes. And, people get this sense that, when you've got somebody who's pretending to be something they're not,
yep, yep,
like they keep telling you that I don't know, they keep telling you how ethical they are.
yep,
And yet, you find out they've been skimming money out of the company accounts under the
yep,
table, that
yep,
kind of thing. So values based leadership is being really clear about what you stand for and living that, even when it's hard,
yep.
even when it's challenging to kind of go, no, I'm going to maintain this, I'm going to stick to my values. But there also needs to be an alignment between the values of the business and the values of the leader. We need to be lining up. And look, business values are a whole different story because they're so tricky and they
Mm.
go so wrong so many times. They
Yep.
can be done really, really well or really badly. There doesn't seem to be a middle ground. They're
Mm.
either brilliant and everyone loves them, or everyone kind of goes, I don't know, there's 5 of them, maybe 6, I don't know. They're written somewhere.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So,
that's that sense of value, is that you need to be clear about who you are and you need to live that.
mm, it's interesting you're talking about organizational values, and when you say they need to align, what happens when they don't align? Because that's a very real thing. Do you know that? Yeah, is it a disaster? Is it something we can live with? Is it should we try and convince the person that they should shift their own personal values to align to the organizational values?
You can't talk someone out of their values.
Yeah.
And look, I had a really good example of this when I used to run an induction program when I was back in my corporate role. And I don't know how this person got through the recruitment process, but they did. And they started in the business and they came to the induction program. And I was talking about the overarching purpose of the organization, which was about, valuating back to the community. And he put his hand up and he said, I didn't sign up for that. And I was like, okay, so tell me what. And he said, look, if it was about making a shit ton of money, I'd be in for that. Totally. A lot of money, I'm down for that. But this giving back to the community stuff, that's bullshit. And he quit, which was great. It was a good outcome.
Yeah.
But that
Yeah.
was an example of someone whose personal values were really at odds with the organisational values. And like I said, I don't know how he made it through the recruitment process, because
Yeah.
the recruitment process was pretty transparent about what to expect when you came to work for the company. But that's the example. You can't change somebody's values. You can't talk them out of it. You're never going to convince them to let go of their values.
Mm.
So sometimes it is enough of a mismatch where they're going to have to go.
Well, also a lot of the younger people now too. The organisational values, yeah, you hang them up on the wall and they're a load of
Mm,
shit. No one remembers them.
mm,
But there are organisations who truly live by their values, and particularly
mm.
social
Yeah.
enterprises, stuff
Yes.
like that, that
They
type
do it
of thing.
well.
Yeah, they do it really well. And there's a lot of well, I might get this wrong, but Gen Z, I actually can't remember which generation, the really young
Mm,
ones, they are
mm,
really friggin' aligned to,
mm,
if you're not matching the value, if you're espousing one set of values for the organization and I see people in here not doing it, I'm
yeah.
not staying.
Yeah.
And they've really become really good at calling people out. I don't
Mm,
know that they would articulate it as such. Hey, you're not living up to your values. I don't know that those would be
mm,
the words they'd use, but they get very, very shitty very
mm.
quick and say, this isn't aligning. This
Yeah.
doesn't work. And I have seen many people, like exactly like you say, that they 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 bang on about being ethical, they bang on about being
Mm,
respectful, they bang on all about and they can tell you
mm,
all the company values, but they're not that.
mm.
And
Yeah.
I don't know what their values are sitting underneath it. I don't understand. This is my opinion again, is that when you talk about values-based leadership, I don't understand why you would be in a leadership role in an organization where the values didn't match yours. Like it's
Mm,
got to be a fear-based situation where I'm too scared to leave, I'm making a lot of money
mm,
here and blah blah blah. So I'm just going to lie. I'm just going to lie about values.
mm.
I actually think when you said you can't talk a person out of their values, going against your values is freaking exhausting.
It
Like it
is.
is just,
Yep.
and you're selling your soul.
Yes.
Like it's the worst.
And it makes you ill. It makes you physically ill in the
Yeah,
long run. People
yeah,
get stress related disease, mental health,
yeah,
depression, that kind of thing. If you kind of imagine it, just say that you go to work for, I don't know, a used car sales yard, and they say to you, you've got to sell these cars at all costs. Don't care what you say to the customers, you've got to move the
yeah,
cars.
yeah,
And you get this little old lady come to look at a car, and she reminds you of your grandma.
yeah,
And the car she's looking at, is an absolute lemon.
yeah,
And she looks at you and she says, if you were me, would you buy this car? That's values in action.
yeah,
And if you're the kind of person who's got a deep set value about honesty, there's no way you're going to be able to lie to her and try and sell her that car. And
yeah.
then you've got to make a decision about, this isn't the right business for me to work in.
Mm.
Or if you go, I'm going to lie to her and sell the car, you're going to feel terrible about that. And you're only going to be able to do it for so long. And then you're going to burn yourself out. You're going to dread going to work. It's like every day I've got to show up and lie to somebody's face.
Well, that depends on your values, doesn't it? Because
Exactly.
if you don't care about that shit,
Exactly.
if your value is money, because
Yep.
I think the person who sold me my Magna wagon did not have honesty values
I
many
many
years
many years
ago.
ago, I had a Magna wagon with the same problems. Mine, the gearbox blew after about 6 months.
Well, this guy told me this is a great one. This is the best one. There's three on the
Mm,
lot. This is the one. And I took it to Melbourne and I had a packet of shapes, barbecue shapes on that I'd been
mm,
munching on because it's a pretty long drive from here.
mm,
And I went to do this. Oh, I don't know. It was a course or something for the day.
mm.
And I get back to the car and it'd been raining. I get back to the car and I thought, oh, gee, I'm a bit hungry. And I stuck my hand in the box of shapes. And because it was that sort of waterproof bag,
Yeah,
I put my hand into a
full of
bag of
water.
water. And then I'm like, I looked and the whole front passenger seat was like a bloody swimming pool.
Oh
It was
no.
just, and it gathered so much water that wasn't even draining anymore. And then I realized that around the top of the window, it was
Mm,
leaking. Now those
mm,
bastards must have known that. They would have washed
yeah.
that goddamn car. And and I think about him a lot when I think about values.
Mm,
I think you your value has to be, well, I no, I don't know, maybe money, but then again, I suppose I just had a thought then that I suppose if you're desperate to put food on the table
mm.
too,
Maybe
they
your
you
top value is your family.
exactly, you
You
don't really
know,
care if you
people
rip
will
off
do,
someone.
yeah. And that's the thing
Yeah,
about values is that, depending on your hierarchy of values, like if you've got two values, one is honesty and one is family, it depends on the order. Like if family comes first and honesty comes second, you might do that because you've got to feed your family. Or if it's the other way around, you might go home and go, sorry, kids, there's no dinner tonight because I
yeah,
couldn't sell that car. I couldn't in all honesty look that person in the eye and say this is a great car,
yeah, yeah. Values are a funny thing, aren't they? I'm
aren't they?
actually I'm glad that we have them, and I'm glad
Mm,
that most people align to their value.
mm,
It's but at the same time, it's just one of the biggest things that we all argue about. It's kind of
yeah,
like, why do you behave like that? How could
yeah,
you do that? How would anyone think that was okay? And we're
yeah,
very opinionated about that. It's
yeah.
like,
We get
how could you
fired up
do
about
that?
our values,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
one of the things about values is it's so hard to map over to somebody else's point of view around them. It's like
Yeah.
honesty versus dishonesty,
Yeah.
or any of those kinds of things. Ethics, even things like teamwork versus don't care about teams.
Mm,
People will get really argumentative about it because it's so deeply held. It feels like such a deep part of ourselves that we can't
yeah.
comprehend how somebody could not feel the same way about it.
Mm. Well, that the greatest example of that in a deadly way is politics and religion. Like
Mm, yeah,
people are so happy to even murder each other,
yeah, over
over a
religion.
clash of
Mm,
values.
mm,
Yeah, it's just well, I think we need them, and I love that we have them. But
mm,
there's times when I just think, wow, wow,
yeah.
we
And
could just chill out a bit.
I've got a slide that I use when I talk about values, and I can't remember where the photo came from now. I really don't remember, but it's actually a photograph of two groups of Buddhist monks in a fist fight with like fists flying and blood everywhere, and they were fighting over because they're both the same religion, but they were fighting over a difference of how it's supplied, I suppose.
Yeah,
And you think of Buddhism, and you think of that sort of peace and compassion, and they
yeah,
were in a fist fight over it. So
yeah.
clashes of values really stir people up.
Yeah, they do. I always say to people, you can't change someone's values because
No.
people are deadly loyal to their
Mm,
values, and
mm,
at any cost. Like
mm,
that's where their allegiance lies, is with their own values, whether you
mm.
like it or not.
Yeah.
They're you cannot shift it. And it's funny values, I thought I would always say things, honesty, integrity, but I used to think, dude, that's so freaking wishy-washy. Like,
Mm,
because we're only honest if it suits us. You know
mm,
what, like that kind of stuff. And there was, I did this thing called findyourvalues.com. And I've mentioned this several times on here. And mine came up as, and I just thought it was a just bit of a bullshit thing. You
mm,
just for fun, a quiz. Mine came up as societal security as my number
mm,
one value. Now, for years and years and years, like if I see anybody get hurt in public,
mm,
like a maniac drives down the road, someone's drunk,
mm,
someone's, I fly off my freaking handle. I'm
mm,
like furious that people could do that, put other
mm,
people at risk and innocent people. But it never crossed my mind, ever, 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 that it was one of my values.
mm.
I never, ever aligned it as a value,
Yeah.
And when this thing came back saying that my highest number one value was societal security,
Mm,
the penny dropped. It
yeah.
made this absolute sense that, yes, because that is why I go into such a rage about it.
Mm,
It is,
mm,
but we're fed this list of honesty, integrity,
mm.
friendliness, all of
Yeah,
those words. And I thought, yeah, it's a much we need to expand our thoughts on what
we do.
values are. And yeah,
Yeah, because they like my top value is making a difference.
Yeah.
And that drives everything that I do, is making a difference.
Yeah.
And I always say to people, whether we do individual values elicitation work, or we're doing values for a team or for a whole organization, I always say to people, really have a think about what values make you special as an organization, because everybody
Mm.
will have, like, everyone has the generic ones,
Yeah.
teamwork, leadership,
Yeah.
integrity, all those ethics, whatever.
Yeah.
There's a sort of standard set of a dozen that every organization has, and it doesn't
Mm.
make you special.
No.
It's like, if teamwork is what you pick out, what's a word for teamwork that really defines what you do, but in a
Yeah.
way that's quite special to you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because otherwise they become so generic that, and then of course nobody lives them, and they end
No.
up on posters in the lift, and they end up on coffee
Yeah.
cups and mouse mats, and everyone has a set. And then I'll find, if I go to talk to an organization, I'll say, what are your values? People are like, oh, I don't know, probably teamwork, maybe, I don't know, there's a list here somewhere.
Yeah.
You've got to make
But it,
them interesting and special, and
but if
people
it
want
was
to.
a value like we care deeply for each other, that's just a
Mm,
bit wanky. But
yeah,
instead of teamwork, then
yeah,
then then that will touch the
yes,
core of the right people.
and then
That.
they remember it.
Yeah. Yeah. And am
They
I
don't
caring
go,
deeply? I'm not really. I need to
yeah,
pull my head in. I'm not really.
and it defines it. It's like, what does that mean? And look, you have to define values too, and what does this actually mean in action? And I remember years ago now, I was asked to facilitate um, a session with a manager who, they had a value of community in their organization. Community, I can't remember exactly, but community. And she'd decided that her expression of community was that everyone in her team had to do a certain amount of community service per month. And it was quite a lot. And she
Mm.
had somebody in her team who said, look, I'm a young dad. I've got a family. My wife's pretty stressed out with the new baby and the toddler. And I can't do however many hours of community service a week or a month or whatever.
Mm.
And he said, it's just not viable for me. I'm sorry, I can't do that. And she was trying to performance manage him out of the business because he'd said he couldn't
Wow.
do her idea of what community looked like. And
Wow.
but what the issue was is the organisation had never said what community is. They just said we value community, and then
Yeah.
left it up to everybody's interpretation.
Wow. Wow. But you can't performance match someone else
I know,
out on. Wow.
you know, because it's not like during working hours. This was like, I expect you to do community service in your own time, and he's like, look, I'm sorry, I just can't do that.
Now,
He said, I'd
now,
love to, but I can't.
if they really valued community, they would say we pay for
Exactly,
an hour a month. Everyone does something
exactly.
on
Yep,
our time.
yep,
That would be a more genuine value of
exactly.
community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And look, some of the teams did that. There were teams that were,
Yeah.
I don't know, painting houses for homeless people and things like that in work time. They'd gone once a month or once a quarter, we're going to spend a half day and we're going to do something in the community, and then we're going to have a team lunch or whatever. But because it had never been defined, some teams were doing it work hours, some weren't, some said, who cares, just whatever. Other people had said, like this woman, you've got to do this many hours of community service for a charity, you know.
Wow.
So,
Wow. And you
mm,
know what the thing is that though that a lot of organizations don't actually get that if you give people half a day a month to go do something like that, the performance is actually better
mm,
anyway.
yeah,
You're not losing that half day, you're actually gaining it with all their
mm,
performance over the other days because they're
mm,
solid. They feel like they have a sense of purpose and meaning, and
mm,
they sense
yeah.
of a sense of togetherness and a sense of ownership. So it's an amazing difference. I think people miss that.
Yeah, and
People miss that point.
it can be a great team building activity. If you're
Absolutely.
going, like, I remember years and years ago now, there's a team that I was part of. We did a day of, we were planting trees for, some sort of nature conservation thing. And it was such a good day. We just hung out and chatted while we are planting trees. You had to do it in pairs, one person to hold
Mm.
the tree, the other one to fill in the hole. And it was such a great day because we swapped around. We sort of worked every hour, we'd swap partners. And so by the end of the day, you'd work with everyone in the team for a good hour, just chit chatting. It was such a good
Mm.
team building activity.
Mm. That's great, isn't it?
Mm.
I love this. Well, I've loved this conversation. Now, thank you so much for joining me. Where can people find you if they want to start following you, which I hope they do, and hope
Mm-hmm.
they get you to do some work, whatever whatever. But where can they find you?
So I'm on LinkedIn is probably the best place professional connection. So it's
Yeah.
Rosalind Cardinal on LinkedIn. I'm also on Twitter and on Facebook. You can get me at either of my two websites. So I've got my shapingchange.com.au, which is my consulting website. And
Yeah.
then I've got womensleaderarchetypes.com.au, which is the fairly brand new home of the archetypes, because it got to a point where I felt like it deserved to have a space of its own.
Yeah, that's fantastic. All right. Well,
Mm.
I will put both of those in the show notes, so that
Mm-hmm.
people can click on them, and your LinkedIn. And I don't do Twitter. Is that all right?
No, I don't mind if you don't.
No.
It's becoming a bit of a weird place, Twitter. You know,
Yeah,
yeah, it's kind of gone a bit weird. It's quite
yeah.
political and quite
It's nasty. It's a
yeah.
nasty freaking platform. I don't understand what I don't. I think I have a. Well, I do, but I haven't used it in bloody. Oh, well, now see, I'm showing my age and I'm showing my bullshit, because you know how the older you get, the worse judge you are of time.
Yeah. It's like a million years ago when I was a kid. I do
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
I don't know, sometime 100 years ago.
Yeah,
Yeah, look, I've
I know.
started on Twitter way back when I first started my business. I've been on it since about 2012, and it used to be really business oriented. I used to quite
Yeah,
enjoy it because you could get
yeah.
on and you could talk to people in business. There's actually quite a good HR community on there that I'm connected with, but
Oh, that's
the rest
good.
of Twitter's turned into a bit of a dumpster fire. It really has.
I know. Yeah, I know. 2000. I do remember it was 2016. I think I
Mm,
joined it. Yes. So, but anyway, all right. Well, I'll put them in the show notes. Rosalind, thank you so much for joining me. This has been a delightful conversation. Absolutely. And eye-opening too. I think these are the things that a lot of people don't talk about and don't, but thank
mm.
you very much. Really
My
appreciate it.
pleasure. And look, thanks for having me on the show. It's been great. It's a
My
great
pleasure.
chat. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too. Good. All right. Well, I'll catch
Lovely.
up with you again, and thank you so
Yeah,
much.
lovely.
Thanks. See ya.
Bye.